Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Thor Ragnarok in English, then you must like this video. If you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Thor. Ragnarok, we will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we'll talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film apart from this week. We'll discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Thor Ragnarok is a 2017 American superhero film based on the Marvel Comics character Thor, produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. It is the sequel to Thor 2011 and Thor The Dark World 2013, and is the 17th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe MCU. The film was directed by Taika Waititi from a screenplay by Eric Pearson and the writing team of Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost, and stars Chris Hemsworth as Thor alongside Tom Hiddleston, Kate Blanchett, Idris Elba, Jeff Goldblum, Tessa Thompson, Carl Urban, Mark Ruffalo, and Anthony Hopkins. In Thor Ragnarok, Thor must escape the alien planet Sakaar in time to save Asgard from Hela, Blanchett, and the impending Ragnarok. A third Thor film was confirmed in January 2014, when Kyle and Yost began work on the screenplay. The involvement of Hemsworth and Hiddleston was announced that October, and the film's title was revealed to be Thor Ragnarok later that month. Waititi joined the film as director a year later after Thor The Dark World director Alan Taylor chose not to return. Ruffalo joined the cast, reprising the role of Bruce Banner Hulk from previous MCU films, which allowed elements of the 2006 comic storyline, Planet Hulk, to be adapted for Ragnarok. The rest of the cast, including Blanchett as Hela, was confirmed in May 2016, with Pearson's involvement revealed at the start of filming that July. Principal photography took place in Brisbane and Sydney, Australia, with the film also having exclusive use of Village Roadshow Studios in Oxenford, concluding in October 2016. Thor Ragnarok premiered at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood, Los Angeles on October 10, 2017, and was released in the United States on November 3rd, as part of Phase 3 of the MCU. The film received praise for its acting and Waititi's direction, as well as the action sequences, visual effects, musical score, and humor, with many critics considering it to be the best installment of the Thor franchise. It grossed $855 million, becoming the highest-grossing film of the series and the 9th highest-grossing film of 2017. A sequel, Thor: Love and Thunder, was released in July 2022. Plot: 2 years after the Battle of Sokovia, Thor is imprisoned by the fire demon Surtur, who reveals that Thor's father Odin is no longer on Asgard. He explains that the realm will soon be destroyed during the prophesied apocalypse Ragnarok, once Surtur unites his crown with the eternal flame that burns in Odin's vault. Thor frees himself, defeats Surtur, and takes his crown, believing he has prevented Ragnarok. Thor returns to Asgard to find Heimdall gone and his estranged brother Loki posing as Odin. He forces Loki to help find their father, who Loki put a spell on after his presumed sacrifice years before. With directions from Stephen Strange, they find Odin in Norway. Unpossessed, Odin explains that he is dying. Ragnarok is imminent despite Thor's efforts, and his death will free his firstborn child, Hela, from Hel, a prison she was sealed in long ago. Hela, a sibling Thor and Loki did not know existed, was the leader of Asgard's armies and conquered the 9 realms with Odin. But he imprisoned her and wrote her out of history after she became too bloodthirsty and did not share his views on peace. Odin dies and Hela appears after being freed from her prison. She destroys Thor's hammer Mjolnir and pursues the two as they attempt to flee through the Bifrost Bridge, knocking them out into space. Arriving in Asgard, Hela defeats its army, slays the Warriors 3, and resurrects the ancient dead who once fought with her, including her giant wolf Fenris. She appoints the Asgardian Skurge as her executioner. Hela plans to use the Bifrost to expand Asgard's empire, but Heimdall takes the sword that controls the Bifrost. Meanwhile, Thor crash lands on Sakaar, a garbage planet surrounded by wormholes. A slave trader designated Scrapper 142 subdues him with an obedience disc and sells him as a gladiator to Sakaar's ruler, the Grandmaster, with whom Loki has already ingratiated himself. Thor recognizes 142 as a Valkyrie, one of a legendary force of female warriors who were killed fighting Hela eons ago. Thor is forced to compete in the Grandmaster's Contest of Champions, facing his friend Hulk. Summoning lightning, Thor gets the upper hand, but the Grandmaster sabotages the fight to ensure Hulk's victory. Still enslaved after the fight, Thor attempts to convince Hulk and 142 to help him save Asgard, but neither is willing. Thor finds the Quinjet that brought Hulk to Sakaar. Hulk inadvertently destroys the Quinjet, but a recording of Natasha Romanoff causes Hulk to transform back into Bruce Banner for the first time since leaving Sokovia. 142 decides to help Thor save Asgard. Loki helps them steal one of the Grandmaster's ships. They liberate the other gladiators who, incited by two aliens named Korg and Meek, stage a revolution. Loki again attempts to betray his brother, but Thor anticipates this and incapacitates him. Thor, Banner, and 142 escape through a wormhole to Asgard, where Hela's forces attack Heimdall and the Asgardian citizens. Hulk defeats Fenris, Loki and the gladiators arrive to help, and a repentant Scourge sacrifices himself to save the citizens. Thor, battling Hela, loses his right eye and has a vision of Odin that helps him realize only Ragnarok can stop her, as she is too powerful. He sends Loki to trigger Ragnarok by placing Surtur's crown in the eternal flame. Surtur is reborn and destroys Asgard, killing Hela. Aboard the Grandmaster's spaceship, the Statesman, Thor, now king, reconciles with Loki and decides to take his people to Earth. In a mid-credits scene, they are intercepted by a large spacecraft. In a post-credits scene, the overthrown Grandmaster is confronted by his former subjects. Music. Main article, Thor Ragnarok soundtrack. By August 2016, Mark Mothersbaugh was hired to score the film. The synthesized score is influenced by the work of Jean-Michel Jarre. Waititi stated he would have asked the band Queen to work on the soundtrack for the film if their lead singer Freddie Mercury was still alive, because the film is a cool, bold, colorful cosmic adventure, which would have suited the feel of the band. Additional music featured in the film include Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin and Pure Imagination from the film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 1971. Patrick Doyle's themes from Thor and Brian Tyler's themes from The Dark World and Age of Ultron, as well as Joe Harnell's The Lonely Man theme from the television series The Incredible Hulk, 1977 to 1982, are also used in the film. Hollywood Records released the film's soundtrack digitally on October 20th, 2017, and physically on November 10th, 2017. Reception. Box office. Thor Ragnarok grossed $316 million in the United States and Canada and $539 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $855 million. In September 2017, a survey from Fandango indicated that Ragnarok was the most anticipated fall film. On the weekend of November 3rd, 2017, the film earned $25.4 million from IMAX showings, surpassing Doctor Strange as the largest for a November weekend setting. The film had earned $650.1 million globally, surpassing the total grosses for Thor, $449.3 million, and Thor: The Dark World, $644.6 million, by the end of its third weekend. It became the ninth highest-grossing film of 2017. Deadline Hollywood calculated the film's net profit as $174.2 million, accounting for production budgets, marketing, talent participations, and other costs. Box office grosses and home media revenues placed it 8th on their list of 2017's most valuable blockbusters. Thor Ragnarok earned $46.8 million on its opening day in the United States and Canada, including $14.5 million from Thursday night previews, and had a total weekend gross of $122.7 million, which was the top film for the weekend, the sixth best November opening, and the largest opening for all Thor films. IMAX contributed $12.2 million, which was the second best IMAX opening of 2017 and its third best November opening. The film's earnings on Sunday, $32.1 million, was the second best Sunday in November after The Hunger Games: Catching Fire, 2013, $34.5 million, $181. The film had been projected to gross $125 million in its opening weekend, $199,200. Ragnarok remained the number one film in its second weekend, having earned a total of $211.6 million, which surpassed the entire runs of Thor, $181 million, and The Dark World, $206.4 million. In its third weekend, Thor Ragnarok fell to third at the box office and fourth in its fourth and fifth weekends. The film surpassed its projected total domestic gross of $280 million in its fifth weekend, with $291.4 million. Thor Ragnarok was fifth in its sixth weekend and seventh in its seventh weekend. The final weekend, it remained in the top 10. Outside the United States and Canada, the film opened in 36 markets in its first weekend, ranking first in all and earning $109 million, $6 million of which came from 189 IMAX screens. The United Kingdom opening, $16.2 million, was the best October opening for a non-James Bond film. South Korea, $15.7 million, Australia, $8.4 million, Brazil, $8.1 million, Indonesia, $5.5 million, Taiwan, $5.4 million, the Philippines, $3.8 million, Malaysia, $3.5 million, New Zealand, Vietnam, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Croatia, and South Africa had the best October opening weekend ever, while France, $7.7 million, had the second best. Brazil also had the third best debut for an MCU film, while New Zealand's opening was the biggest of 2017. In its second weekend, Ragnarok opened at number one in 19 more markets, with the largest November opening ever in China, $56.3 million, including $6 million from 446 IMAX screens, Mexico, $10.8 million, Germany, $8.9 million, and India, $5.5 million. It also remained at number one in many existing markets. The film earned an additional $13.2 million from 788 IMAX screens, the best November opening. In its third weekend, the film remained at number one in over 30 countries and became the highest-grossing superhero film in the Czech Republic. By its fifth weekend, Ragnarok had become the highest-grossing superhero film in Central and Eastern Europe. As of December 10, 2017, the film's largest markets were China, $112 million, the United Kingdom, $40.4 million, and South Korea, $35.1 million. I wouldn't have picked Chris Hemsworth as Marvel's breakout comedy star when he was first cast as Thor, God of Thunder, but he turned out to be one of the best things about this never-ending mega franchise. He's tall, brawny, and impossibly handsome, but there's a self-mocking twinkle in his eye. When Thor is in gung-ho jock mode, Hemsworth's wry machismo evokes the young Sean Connery as James Bond, raising an eyebrow at the corniness around him. When he bumbles and stumbles, there's a touch of Cary Grant to his embarrassment. And when he's playing things more or less straight, there's an average guyness to his reactions. All this humanizes an actor who's perpetually at risk of being treated as a life-sized action figure. Hemsworth's charisma holds Thor Ragnarok together whenever it threatens to spin apart, which unfortunately is often. Written by Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost, and directed by Taika Waititi, Hunt for the Wilderpeople, What We Do in the Shadows, this is almost but not quite a standalone picture, tethered to previous Avengers entries only by Thor's opening search for the Infinity Stones, which has led him to be imprisoned by the fire demon Suture. The demon tells him that his father, Odin, Anthony Hopkins, is no longer on Asgard and that their homeworld will soon be destroyed in Ragnarok, a prophesied apocalypse. After that, the film splits into a couple of parallel narratives. Fully half the film is a court intrigue war picture, charting the takeover of Asgard by Thor's long-lost sister Hela, Cate Blanchett, a black-clad force of nature who seems to turn into a demonic stag beast when she fights. Her head sprouts elegant antlers that might have been sketched in the air with a brush dipped in India ink. The other, Thor Ragnarok, is a largely comedic gladiator movie with prison thriller accents. Thor is trapped on the planet Sakaar, where he's forced to fight the planet's reigning champion, the Hulk, Mark Ruffalo. As revealed in trailers, Tom Hiddleston's Loki is back too. And why wouldn't he be? He's easily the most entertaining villain, or anti-hero, in the franchise. So beguiling that when Thor inevitably succumbs to his charisma and fights alongside him, both he and the audience momentarily forget how much death and property destruction he's caused in prior chapters. The overqualified supporting cast does a lot with not quite enough. Sakaar's Grandmaster is Jeff Goldblum, who gives exactly the sort of performance you'd want Jeff Goldblum to give in a project like this. Intellectually detached, droll, and smart-alecky, yet also somehow petty, arbitrary, and sadistic. Goldblum's unique genius is his ability to toss off lines that might have seemed as overripe as week-old avocados on the page, like, "Let's have a hand for all of our undercard competitors who died so gruesomely." From the inventive way he adds ums and ahs, you can tell that he's also a jazz musician. The worst thing I can say about him is that he's more appealing here than well used. Either there should have been a lot more of him, though not at the expense of Blanchett, who's a slinky hoot, or his efforts should have been more finely shaped by the filmmakers, so that his brilliance cohered into a bona fide character, or else pushed on towards daddiest madness, like Tim Curry as Dr. Frank N. Furter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or the late Gene Wilder's title performance in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The latter seems to have been what Waititi and company were going for in casting Goldblum. When Thor is introduced to Sakaar, pure imagination plays on the soundtrack. As Valkyrie, an alcoholic bounty hunter who once fought against Hela and now works for the Grandmaster, Tessa Thompson more than holds her own in scenes opposite Hiddleston, Hemsworth, and Ruffalo. She's hard-boiled, like a tough dame in a 1940s detective film spitting wisecracks. As Scourge, a warrior who survives Hela's destructive takeover of Asgard and joins her in order to survive, Lord of the Rings, star Karl Urban captures the unhappiness of a sellout who knows he's better than the life he's expediently chosen. But so much of his performance is reduced to anguished reaction shots that you may wonder, as you might with Thompson, whether the best bits got cut for pacing. In the run-up to release, much was made of the allegedly drastic shift in tone that would make this project unique. It was sold as a light, funky, largely comedic effort, practically a spoof of Marvel's usual, with Thor and the Hulk serving as the anchor of, basically, a buddy movie, like the kind Bob Hope and Bing Crosby used to churn out. There are times when it gets close to that promised film, and when it hits pay dirt, it is delightful. Particularly during very broad slapstick moments, as when Hulk enters the arena and Thor laughs with relief and announces, "I know him, he's a friend from work." And in moments of relatively subdued character development, as when Thor and Hulk commiserate in private, and we learn that the big green guy loves it on Sakaar because the people treat him as an athletic superstar and folk hero, in contrast to the pariah treatment he gets back on Earth. When you're mainly good at Hulk smash, it's a relief to land a job that asks you to do nothing but. When Hulk turns back into Bruce Banner, Ruffalo reminds us that he's giving two performances here, both superb. He revels in the looming physicality of Hulk, a motion capture performance on par with Andy Serkis's best. But when he turns back into a regular man, he seems to shrink within himself. He's unafraid to use his shortness for laughs, appearing side by side against the towering Hemsworth in wide shots like the superhero answer to Laurel and Hardy. Banner's complaints are small too, and yet they aren't because of their recognizable humanity. "You're just using me to get to Hulk," he whines. "It's gross. You're a bad friend." Unfortunately, as is often the case with Marvel films, the adventurous aspects aren't adventurous enough, and the more predictable aspects, the CGI-saturated fight scenes with bodies whirling through the air, the wide shots of cities burning and giant creatures on the rampage, the images of whooshing, twisting stargates and bodies falling from the sky like meteors, are more frenzied and loud than inspired, and eventually become monotonous. The movie's final third, yet another Marvel big battle, is as tedious as the first two-thirds are endearing. There's a whiff of post-colonialist critique in the presentation of Asgard as an empire that was founded on war, but that now hypocritically congratulates itself for being peaceful. But the screenplay doesn't develop the idea as well as it might. A climactic twist, which I won't reveal here, is presented in such a tonally inappropriate way that it calls the film's entire approach into question. Ant-Man's status as the best off-brand MCU film remains unchallenged. Only the comic chemistry of the main quadrangle, Hemsworth, Hiddleston, Thompson, and Ruffalo, prevents Thor Ragnarok from devolving into another standard-issue superhero crash-and-bash fest. Still, there's plenty to like here. Waititi, his cinematographer Javier Aguirre-Sorob, Blue Jasmine, and his production designer Dan Henna take their cues from pop art-influenced comic book adaptations of the 60s and 70s, like TV's Batman, Logan's Run, Flash Gordon, and The Black Hole, filling the screen with kitschy costumes, furniture, artifacts, and machinery envisioned in the tiled, knobby style of the late great illustrator Jack Kirby, and presenting it all in oversaturated color. The disco drug trip gaudiness is a welcome change of pace from superhero cinema's default bled by leeches look. At one point, Thor gripes about the red and white patterning of the capital city's interiors, as well he should. They're hideous. Mark Mothersbaugh, the one-time Devo co-founder and composer who scored 4 Wes Anderson films, creates a retro synth soundtrack suited to the era of science fiction cinema in which characters wore jumpsuits. This is a close but no cigar movie, but so enjoyable for the most part and so modest in its aims that its disappointments aren't devastating. I'd watch the first 90 minutes again anytime. Hey comic book fans, it's another Thor movie, and that can only mean one thing. It's almost time for another Avengers movie. While you wait, Disney and Marvel Studios hope to loot another $500 million or so from the world's wallets with this outlandish amuse-bouche featuring the God of Thunder and his abs of steel. With yet another confusing plot crudely bastardized from Norse mythology in which most of the action takes place on a parallel world you care nothing about. Like Thor's 2 previous solo outings, definite low points in the Marvel oeuvre, this one is pretty much skippable, although it's not without its pleasures, most notably the fact that Thor's not so solo this time around, with cameo/co-starring opportunities for the Hulk, Doctor Strange, and a few leftover bits of Tony Stark's wardrobe, including a retro Duran Duran t-shirt that's good for a laugh. And while it's not saying much, Thor Ragnarok is easily the best of the 3 Thor movies. Or maybe I just think so because its screenwriters and I finally seem to agree on one thing. The Thor movies are preposterous. Rather than taking any of what happens seriously, co-writers Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher L. Yost seem to have anticipated the film's own Mystery Science Theater 3000 track, incorporating self-aware punchlines throughout. The script pokes fun at the movie's plot, production design, locations, and past adventures. Heck, not even the obligatory cameo from Thor co-creator Stan Lee is sacred, identified here as the creepy old man who shears Thor's tresses, resulting in a butch new rugby haircut. Whereas the 2 previous Thor movies were somber battle epics directed by Kenneth Branagh, who attempted an awkward sort of pulp Shakespeare hybrid, and Alan Taylor, a Game of Thrones helmer obsessed with making it gritty, respectively, the latest was clearly conceived as a wacky adventure comedy. Irreverent almost to the point of camp, that approach fits comfortably within the wheelhouse of Kiwi director Taika Waititi, for whom this undertaking was roughly 100 times the scale of his next most expensive production, cult hits Hunt for the Wilder People and What We Do in the Shadows. Frankly, as heroes go, Thor is a big yawn. A virtually invincible guy with a hammer, built like a linebacker and woodenly played by the otherwise charismatic Chris Hemsworth, so great in Rush and last year's Ghostbusters. Meanwhile, Waititi is someone worth celebrating. A small-time actor-director from faraway New Zealand who has leveraged a decade of eccentric, inventive indie features, many featured at Sundance, into a shot at helming one of the year's biggest tentpoles. More heroic still, Waititi has managed to finally imbue Marvel's dullest Avenger with a personality, even if said personality is little more than stony stoicism, best revealed in comedy riffs with hot-headed rival ally the Hulk, Mark Ruffalo, whom we first meet trapped in mean green all-CG mode. Ragnarok finds a creative way to pit these two Avengers against one another. Later, once Hulk is mellowed into human form, they bicker over who's the strongest. All of which is far more entertaining than watching them smash and hammer some generic CG adversary, although there's plenty of that in the final act as well. It also reintroduces Thor's troublemaking kid brother, Loki, Tom Hiddleston, who kinda helped prevent the nonsensical apocalypse of Thor: The Dark World, leaving everyone but the audience to think he had died a hero. And it even enlists yet another Oscar winner to the ensemble, casting Cate Blanchett as Hela, the older sister Thor never knew he had, and who now returns to enact an ancient Norse prophecy, hence Ragnarok, that foretold an epic battle resulting in the death of many gods and the destruction of their realm. Dressed in form-fitting black fetish gear and sporting a twisting, antler-spiked headdress, Blanchett looks like some sort of latter-day Maleficent, and suggests how Marlene Dietrich or Barbara Stanwyck might have interpreted a Marvel villainess, throwing back her shoulders and playing to the camera. In her first encounter with her brothers, she demonstrates her awesome power by crushing Thor's almighty hammer and banishing him to a distant trash planet while she sets about dismantling Asgard. At the risk of mixing the DC and Marvel universes, Asgard is one of those places that, like Superman's home planet of Krypton, exists to be destroyed, and Waititi's challenge with Ragnarok is how to fulfill a prophecy and still make it feel like a happy ending. I'll let you be the judge of how well he succeeds, since as far as I'm concerned, the less time spent on Asgard, the better. It's basically an over-art-directed Maxfield Parrish painting, where the costumes are tacky and the extras always look bored. It's a place that matters only to Odin, Anthony Hopkins, who's apparently been doing oceanfront yoga against a green screen on Earth since we last saw him. At any rate, it's no great loss that Hela is free to wreak havoc on Asgard while Thor and Loki are stranded on Sakaar, which is sort of an intergalactic trash dump where waylaid heroes are forced to compete in elaborate gladiator battles. To elaborate would spoil certain surprises. Suffice it to say, Jeff Goldblum pops up as the so-called Grandmaster, an effete emperor of some sort who seems to have taken makeup tips from Padme Amidala. Incidentally, Natalie Portman had the good sense to sit out this Thor sequel. Goldblum is actually the best thing about this mess, since he openly mocks the film's underlying silliness, a pursuit in which he is ably assisted by Tessa Thompson, who plays a sarcastic Han Solo-like renegade who first captures Thor, then later helps him to escape through the Devil's Anus. Yes, that's what the movie actually calls the gaping CG wormhole that connects Sakaar with Asgard, as the Grandmaster calls Asgard in another such joke. Back in the day, audiences had to wait a few weeks for Mad Magazine to skewer the latest self-important Hollywood blockbuster. These days, Marvel sequels arrive as parodies of the earnest, self-respecting entries that launched each character. CF Iron Man 2's undoing of all that Iron Man established. If only that were an indication of the genre's own impending Ragnarok, a sign that the entire phenomenon is about to implode, only to be reborn as something more worthy of the audience's time and intelligence. Review: Thor Ragnarok. He might be able to summon lightning from the skies and smite foes with his mighty hammer, but this latest comic book outing bestows upon Thor an even superpower: a sense of humor. It's there from the opening seconds when we find our Norse god dangling before some horned demon whose portentous monologuing is undercut by Thor's continual interruptions as he slowly spins around on his chains. Hang on a minute, coming round again. For a relative newcomer to the Earth, Thor has clearly got the knack of 21st century comic timing. That's the general register of this entertaining but frankly inconsequential Marvel movie. It's what you'd call a romp, and one whose lurid 1980s retro stylings bring it closer to the Guardians of the Galaxy end of the spectrum, though its spiritual forebears would also include Mike Hodges' Flash Gordon, He-Man, and the Masters of the Universe, and possibly Red Dwarf. Comic book movies have spent a long time striving to be taken as serious, grown-up entertainment, but Thor Ragnarok is almost an admission that you can't play this material straight. This is probably the wisest strategy with Thor. Despite his Avenger status, he has never felt particularly key to proceedings in the ever-unfolding Marvel Universe. His fantasy realm does not easily intersect with our own, and his last solo movie, Thor: The Dark World, was probably the weakest Marvel installment to date. So this time, they've brought in New Zealander director Taika Waititi, best known for lovable, considerably smaller-scale movies like Hunt for the Wilder People and vampire spoof What We Do in the Shadows. Waititi infuses proceedings with that familiar, generously self-deprecating Kiwi wit, nowhere more so than in his own scene-stealing voice turn as a cheery blue rock monster. He also unlocks untapped comedy reserves in Chris Hemsworth, who diffuses his character's beefcake machismo with a quick tongue and a barely concealed insecurity. He's like Ben Stiller in the body of Dolph Lundgren. Thor's family problems are at the root of this busy saga. His adoptive brother Loki, Tom Hiddleston, is up to his usual tricks, on top of which they discover they have an elder sister, Hela, the goddess of death. Norse scholars look away now. Played by Cate Blanchett, with emo eye makeup and spiky antlers, she's like a Norse Maleficent. While she sets about tearing up Asgard, Thor and Loki find themselves stranded on a brightly colored planet that looks as if it's made from the discarded sets of 1980s TV shows. Its face-painted, thrift store couteured inhabitants could be refugees from new wave synth bands. The score is by Devo's Mark Mothersbaugh, which makes this okay. That the ruler of this planet is Jeff Goldblum with a blue stripe down his chin is entirely appropriate, if not particularly scary. He condemns the captive Thor to gladiatorial combat, where his foe turns out to be a friend from work. If you've seen the trailer, this is not a spoiler. Fans will be satisfied at the most fleshed-out performance of Hulk we've yet had in this Marvel universe, though Mark Ruffalo is charmingly confused when he's being Bruce Banner. And rounding out the cast is Tessa Thompson, who turns up as a lapsed warrior from Thor's neck of the cosmos, which is a useful coincidence. There are a great many corners cut, plot holes papered over, and laws of physics bent out of recognition in this movie, to be honest. And if you've sat through the past dozen recent Marvel movies, you'll find the core elements very familiar. A ragtag team of heroes, Thor unimaginatively dubs them the Revengers, an all-powerful antagonist, an impending apocalypse, and a set of essentially unkillable characters. Added to which, the liberal use of CGI and green screen makes for a visual flimsiness. Even the scenes set in Norway look fake. But Thor Ragnarok gets away with all of this because it's so winningly, unpretentiously funny. It basically throws up its hands at its own ridiculousness and plays it all for laughs, and it gets them. The price of this irreverence is the possibility of taking anything that happens all that seriously, even the potential destruction of the Norse god's home. That's not a spoiler either. It's the title of the movie. There's a potentially intriguing subtext about Asgard's gilded spires, and by extension European civilization, having been built on the suffering and riches of others, but being a bit of a downer, it's dealt with fleetingly. The romp must go on. The only chance of stopping her lies with Thor and his trickster brother Loki. Though Thor is trapped on a bizarre planet ruled by the eccentric but oddly non-threatening Grandmaster Jeff Goldblum, forced to fight Bailey in an arena for roaring crowds, Thor encounters the Hulk Mark, Ruval and Valkyrie Tessa Thompson, and together they plot an escape. Blanchett brings real menace to Hela. The combat sequences feel darker and weightier than much of the Marvel Universe, and the characters are engaging, even if Hopkins mostly looks wistfully into the distance. The story also gives more attention to side characters, with Idris Elba's Ham finally stepping up and Karl Urban, Scourge offering an interesting arc, reminding me a little of Sting's role in Dune from 1984. The conclusion ties everything back to Norse legend, rounding off a tale full of rivalry, ambition, betrayal, and sinister fun. I viewed this on DVD from the library, and it's definitely a subwoofer workout with its explosive sound design. Drawing from Norse myth, Ragnar Farrell's great battles, devastating catastrophes, and the eventual flooding of the world. I'm a DB. Already provides a good outline, so I won't repeat it here. What stands out most for me is the sheer entertainment factor. We all know it's pure fantasy, and a movie like this should avoid being too self-serious. Thankfully, this one embraces its absurdity, mixing humor and spectacle in ways that keep it lively and engaging. Even Stan Lee makes his trademark appearance, this time as the eccentric barber who forcibly trims Thor's hair. There's also a surprise uncredited cameo from Matt Damon, portraying Loki in a theatrical play performed for Odin's amusement. Naturally, a spectacle of this kind leans heavily on CGI, and for the most part, the effects are quite impressive. Overall, it's a lively and entertaining film. One small curiosity remains. Who exactly is Taylor Hemsworth, the actress briefly seen as the Earth girl eager to snap a selfie with Thor? To sum it up, the movie is a cosmic ride, bursting with energy. Thor Ragnarok feels like a blend of Douglas Adams' offbeat humor and Jack King Kirby's cosmic visual flair, drawing both from Kirby's Thor comics and his other countless interstellar adventures, giving the film a muscular and iconic presence. Interestingly, Larry Lieber finally receives a screen credit as well. Director Taika Waititi works brilliantly with his cast, who in turn deliver equally strong performances. The only drawback lies in the action sequences, which sometimes feel recycled or overpowered by the sheer volume of CGI that occasionally drowns out the performers. Still, the film maintains the playful yet serious tone established in Guardians of the Galaxy, raising the stakes from the earlier Thor installments. This easily stands as the best of the trilogy, more human in spirit, with a richer villain, Cate Blanchett's Hela, though she deserved more screen time. Waititi himself lends voice and humor to Korg, the stone-bodied warrior with impeccable deadpan delivery, adding further charm. For the first time, Thor undergoes a genuine character arc, something absent or half-hearted in prior entries. The Dark World remains so forgettable that even Odin's fate slips from memory. Ruffalo as Hulk, Bruce Banner, has plenty of standout moments too, particularly since this version of Hulk speaks far more, which audiences may love or find odd. Supporting players all shine in their own way. Tessa Thompson's fierce Valkyrie, Karl Urban's conflicted Scourge, who begins with comedic flair before embracing a darker turn, and even the quirky secretary attending the Grandmaster. Wow, it doesn't carry the emotional resonance of the Guardian saga. I appreciated the bold narrative move regarding Asgard's fate. Marvel finally took a genuine risk, reminiscent of Iron Man 3's twist with the Mandarin. Though much of the action lacks real weight as a comedy infused with Adam's spirit, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and The Long Dark Tea Time of the Duck Soul both come to mind, where amusingly Odin, Thor, and Loki appear as well. Film hits nearly every mark. It's a colorful, breezy space opera that balances self-aware silliness with moments of gravity. Blanchett chews scenery with relish, clearly enjoying herself as much as she did in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Having watched it with a friend who had already seen it and recommended it, I can confidently say it's excellent. The plot involving Thor, Loki, their newly revealed sister, and the possible destruction of Asgard, not to mention the return of a certain green-skinned Avenger, makes for a thrilling package. In short, Thor. Ragnarok comes highly recommended. And don't forget, another cameo from one of Marvel's legendary creators is tucked in there too. With Odin gone and Hela unleashed, ruthless, destructive, and determined to seize Asgard's throne, the stakes couldn't be higher. Her conquest leaves Thor and Loki stranded on Sakaar, a bizarre planet overseen by the flamboyant Grandmaster, where Thor is captured and forced into gladiatorial combat against none other than the Graham's champion, the Hulk. Engaging, and definitely a notch above the typical superhero flick. This entry owes much of its charm to the humor and lightheartedness brought in by New Zealand filmmaker Taika Waititi. Known for his brilliant work on What We Do in the Shadows, Boy Hunt for the Wilder People, and Eagle vs. Shark. Waddy infuses the film with sharp wit and playful energy. Instead of being weighed down by monotonous CGI, spectacles, and endless action, this movie delivers plenty of laughs with clever one-liners. Though unsurprisingly, Waititi saves the best zingers for his own character Korg. Of course, the expected quota of explosive comic book battles still lingers, which prevents it from being flawless. But overall, the film succeeds as a fun and fairly rewarding watch. It is obvious that Marvel drew inspiration from the triumph of Deadpool. To explain Deadpool blended comedy and action, leaning heavily on humor, albeit with more profanity, and Thor Ragnarok adopts a similar formula. Did it succeed? Judging from the roaring laughter in the crowded cinema, absolutely. Personally, I found it amusing enough, though I would have preferred less emphasis on comedy and a bit more weight in storytelling. The villain Hela, Cate Blanchett, didn't entirely captivate me, not because of Blanchett, who was remarkable, but because the character lacked depth and menace. Likewise, while I enjoyed Hulk's contributions in the Avengers films, here he leaned too far into cartoonish territory, both visually and in mannerisms, losing the more realistic edge he once had. That being said, Marvel's use of crossovers adds undeniable entertainment value, and the introduction of fresh characters alongside Thor was a welcome touch. Strict to its basics, however, the narrative and its execution felt middling. Still, it delivered enough thrills for a night out at the movies, even if it didn't reach the heights of Marvel's best efforts. The plot follows Thor imprisoned on a desolate junk planet, forced into a gladiatorial contest to reclaim his freedom, all while racing against time to stop a destructive power from annihilating a god. Scarred. With its humor dialed up, likely influenced by Deadpool, the film at times leans too heavily into comedy at the expense of gravitas. Fortunately, by the midpoint, it manages to find a balance, keeping the laughs without overshadowing the action. The latter half maintains strong momentum. The gags are still amusing, but no longer disruptive, while the story sharpens and the visuals become spectacular. Cate Blanchett in her gothic reimagining as Hela is chilling and stylish in ways I hadn't seen from her before. There are moments that feel bittersweet, especially regarding Thor's fate, and while I wish the heroic aspects had been emphasized more, I still thoroughly enjoyed the ride. The movie kicks off with Thor, Chris Hemsworth, shackled by the fiery demon Sur, voiced by Clancy Brown, who plans to kill him while revealing that Odin, Anthony Hopkins, has abandoned Asgard, leaving the realm vulnerable to the prophecy of Ragnarok, its complete destruction. Thor escapes, seizes Sur's crown, the very object that can trigger Ragnarok, and flees before the demon can reclaim it, setting the stage for the chaos to come. Thor is completely unaware that Odin is gravely ill, and once he passes away, his immensely powerful and malevolent daughter, Hela, Cate Blanchett, will be freed from her confinement to stake her claim over Asgard's throne, a fate that could prove far worse than the prophecy of Ragnarok itself. Without spoiling much further, I can say that this film offers a lively mix of action and comedy, though at times the humor feels excessive and the abundance of side plots occasionally makes the story a little hard to track. Still, overall, it's a fun experience, and I personally rated it just above average. Chris Hemsworth clearly enjoyed himself under the direction of Taika Waititi, known for Eagle vs. Shark, who brings a colorful, cheeky tone to Thor Ragnarok, making it the best of the trilogy, centered on Marvel's God of Thunder. The film feels more in line with Kenneth Branagh's first Thor, 2011, than Alan Taylor's darker and more straightforward sequel, Thor: The Dark World, 2013. The latter avoided comedy, killed off Thor's mother, Freya, and showed Thor reforming from his arrogant ways. By contrast, Waititi and his screenwriting team, Eric Pearson, Marvel One-Shot, Agent Carter, Craig Kyle, Planet Hulk, and Christopher Leost, Max Steel, not only mock Thor, but also push into limits he has never faced. While superhero films often fall into predictable patterns where the hero triumphs and restores order before the credits roll, The first Thor at least showed consequences, with Odin stripping Thor of his hammer and exiling him. To Earth, a strong film challenges its hero, and Thor Ragnarok does just that by forcing him to confront Hela, his older sister, and one of his fiercest opponents yet. To intensify the conflict, the writers also throw in the Incredible Hulk, keeping Thor constantly at a disadvantage through most of the fast-paced 130 minutes. For the first time, he is battling foes who can truly withstand his might. Cate Blanchett revels in her role as Hela, one of Thor's most striking villains. Clad in a sinister black costume reminiscent of Angelina Jolie's Maleficent, complete with eerie antlers that make her look even more menacing. In addition to dodging Hela, Thor also clashes with the Hulk in an off-world gladiatorial contest. Early in the story, he even finds himself captured by the fiery demon Sur, voiced by Clancy Brown, who gleefully announces that Odin no longer rules Asgard and that Ragnarok, the prophesied destruction of the realm, is at hand. Sur boasts that by plunging his crown into the eternal flame within Odin's vault, he will reduce Asgard to ashes. Though bound and taunted, Thor manages to summon his hammer, destroy Helmet, Sur's plans, and return to Ogard, only to find Loki, Tom Hiddleston of Kong Skull Island, impersonating Odin, who has been banished to Earth. Facing the end, Odin warns his sons that his firstborn child, Cate Blanchett, Elizabeth, the Golden Age, will soon escape imprisonment and unleash her wrath upon Asgard. Long ago, Odin imprisoned his eldest daughter because her lust for power and destruction exceeded even his own. Conquests. Once freed, Ella wastes no time in returning to Asgard, instantly reducing to shards and casting Thor and Loki aside. She then slaughters Thor's loyal eyes and takes control, while Thor is hurled to the distant world of Sakaar, a planet obsessed with gladiatorial games. This chaotic realm is overseen by the eccentric Grandmaster Jeff Goldblum of Independence Day, who behaves much like the infamous Roman Emperor Comiotus, deciding who wins and loses regardless of fairness. His prized warrior is none other than the Hulk, who mysteriously disappeared following the events of Avengers Age of Ultron 2015. To everyone's amazement, Thor manages to hold his own against the green behemoth, something no other opponent had survived, and the display convinces the Grandmaster to spare his life. Thor attempts to enlist Hulk's help in returning to Asgard to stop Hela, but Scrapper 142, Tessa Thompson of Creed, the bounty hunter who captured him, restrains him with an electronic taser. Over time, Thor convinces her to fight alongside them, discovering that she's in fact a former Valkyrie who once battled Hela and abandoned the fight after barely surviving. Meanwhile, Ella devastates Ogard, though Thor remains determined to lead his people to safety, ultimately evacuating them aboard a colossal starship in a sequence that mirrors the Dunkirk evacuation of World War II. Thor Ragnarok expands the saga by revealing hidden history about Odin's ruthless campaigns and tarnishing the benevolent image he projected in earlier films. The Battle of Hela and the Valkyries plays out with the grandeur of a Renaissance masterpiece brought to life under the direction of New Zealander Takeaway Waititi. Best known for What We Do in the Shadows 2014 and Hunt for the Wilder People, the film takes on a radically different tone through sharp humor. Wadecki and his team bring new dimensions to Thor and his companions, revitalizing the franchise by stripping away Asgard's stability, removing Odin and destroying Jue. Thor, often portrayed with buffoonish charm, becomes endearingly comedic. While Cate Blanchett imbues Hela with striking menace, her presence unforgettable as she summons antler headdresses with a chilling flourish. Her eventual downfall is both visually grand and narratively satisfying. While some fans may resist the irreverent humor that permeates the film, this bold reinvention feels overdue. Thor, as one of Marvel's core icons, the second Avenger to headline a player solo film, finally receives a fresh identity after a sequel bogged down by gloom, poor writing, and a forgettable villain. Having appeared only in team-up stories since the God of Thunder now reclaims the spotlight in a third film. that abandons earthly ties to fully embrace cosmic storytelling with Phase. 3. Marvel handed the reins to Waititi, whose comedic sensibilities and fearless approach provide one of the franchise's most entertaining shifts yet. Although the director does not take on the role of screenwriter in this installment, he exerts a strong creative presence, shaping the narrative conceived by Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Elio, and greatly amplifying the original story's potential. In this chapter, Thor, Chris Hemsworth finds himself stranded on a distant side of the universe. He must battle against time to make his way back to Asgard and prevent Ragnarok, the annihilation of his realm at the hands of the ruthless and immensely powerful Hela, Cate Blanchett. The film begins with Thor narrating to the audience that following the events of Age of Ultron, he roamed the cosmos in search of the Infinity Stones, yet uncovered nothing. His travels led him down a path of devastation until he was confronted by the fire demon Sur within his cavernous domain. From these very first moments, the sharper, biting tone of the humor becomes evident, paired with a concise introduction to the concept of Ragnarok. This prologue also delivers a striking action sequence featuring Thor clashing with Sur and his army of minions. The mixture of combat, comedic timing, and bold cinematic framing immediately sets the pace for what will be an energetic 2-hour adventure. The first 10 minutes alone prepare viewers for a singular, exhilarating experience. Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, also makes an appearance when Thor and Loki arrive on Earth in pursuit of their father, Odin. The encounter is presented in an expanded version of the end credit sequence from Doctor Strange 2016, offering an enjoyable showcase of magical interplay and humorous exchanges between the brothers and the sorcerer. Supreme. Within this segment, it's also revealed that Thor's relationship with Jane has ended, and the brothers share their final farewell with Odin. Before passing, Odin discloses the existence of his firstborn child, Ella, the goddess of death, who will be unleashed by his imminent demise, bringing Ragnarok and Asgard's doom. Soon after, a confrontation erupts between the brothers and Hela, resulting in Thor's banishment to Sakaar, where he is captured by a scavenger, Tessa Thompson, who is revealed to be a former Valkyrie, one of Asgard's legendary warrior maidens. On Sakaar, Thor encounters the Grandmaster Jeff Goldblum, the eccentric ruler of the planet and orchestrator of its gladiatorial contests. Goldblum's languid delivery, coupled with his lighthearted, teasing interactions with others, makes his portrayal one of the film's standout performances. Alongside him is Korg, a Cronin voiced by Taika Waititi himself. Despite his imposing stone form, Korg's calm tone and humorous delivery provide some of the film's funniest scenes, cementing him as a beloved comedic highlight. One of the film's most memorable portions comes with the Grandmaster's Tournament of Flick Champions, where Thor is forced into combat against the reigning champion. The revelation that this champion is none other than the Incredible Hulk, Mark Ruffalo, sets the stage for a spectacular clash. This plotline borrows elements from the Planet Hulk comic arc, enriching Ragnarok's storyline. Their battle in arena, followed by their reluctant camaraderie, proves to be among the film's most entertaining moments. Here, Hulk is depicted as more developed, capable of speech and reasoning, though still temperamental. When he eventually reverts to Bruce Banner, the humor escalates even further. Mark Ruffalo thrives in both roles, delivering witty exchanges and memorable scenes that add tremendous charm. What shines throughout is the dynamic among the newly formed team Thor, Loki, Valkyrie, and Hulk, who unite in a desperate attempt to stop Hela and save Asgard from destruction. Their interactions brim with banter, reluctant alliances, and well-timed humor, making their journey both thrilling and comical. The adaptation to exile, their uncertain future, and their shared determination to protect their home all unfold with an undercurrent of levity that balances the apocalyptic stakes. No character spends time philosophizing or questioning their essence. Every figure exists purely for the adventure, the humor, and the spectacle, free from the burden of deep reflection or conceptual build-up. Ragnarok embraces both trial and error, thriving through crude, juvenile or sarcastic gags, eccentric casting decisions, and flamboyant visuals. Speaking of visuals, the design of Sakaar, where much of the story unfolds, is as audacious as the planetary landscapes in Guardians of the Galaxy. The city bursts with vibrancy, blending the futuristic with the primitive, the sleek with the savage, presenting a lawless yet fascinating chaos. Populated by countless species and bizarre beings, its visual design is intentionally over the top and daring, which works perfectly. Flashy, glowing weapons, fast ships, and exhilarating aerial chases inject sheer excitement, while echoing the legacy of Star Wars, a gift for die-hard science fiction fans. In terms of aesthetic homage, Whitey nods directly to King Jack Kirby, employing sharp lines, bold geometrical motifs, and wildly saturated colors. Back in the day, Asgard, Thor, and his newly assembled allies engage in monumental clashes with Hellas forces and the colossal Vulf Fenris, resurrected by the eternal flames, culminating in Hulk's battle with Fenris, and the fiery return of Sur to bring the prophecy to life. This climactic portion is epic and thrilling, though not without imperfections. Unlike Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which balances gravity and levity, Thor Ragnarok oscillates unevenly between extremes. Hela's introduction, embodied powerfully by Cate Blanchett, is convincing, yet the sense lingers of two distinct films spliced together without seamless narrative stitching. On one side, Ogard becomes the stage for the goddess of death's rule over a nearly extinct people. On the other, Sakaar is pure, indescribable madness. Borrowing inspiration from galactic misadventures, Ragnarok also infuses its soundtrack with pop energy, Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song blaring twice to stunning effect alongside magic swords in the face of evil. Whitey affirms his reputation as one of Hollywood's most inventive directors, injecting new flair into Thor's saga and cementing this as the strongest entry in the trilogy. What he delivers is a lively action comedy, enriched by an exceptional supporting cast. Fans long awaited an epic rooted in Norse myths with solemn battles, vast armies, and heroic gravitas. Instead, Waititi gleefully dismantles those expectations, turning them upside down with relentless comedy. Personally, though not an ardent devotee of moral heroes, I still watch them all for their breezy escapism, and this one stands among the best of the three Thor installments. It's easily my favorite. The futuristic visual spectacle is top tier, the plot solid enough, and above all, the humor works brilliantly. The abundance of silly quips fits the film's playful rhythm, and the performances meet every expectation. In the end, Thor Ragnarok feels closer in spirit to Deadpool, ranking among my personal favorite superhero films. Action blended with comedy. I vaguely recall watching the first Thor film, though honestly these superhero flicks tend to blur together in my memory. I definitely skipped a few installments along the way, because there were parts of Thor Ragnarok that clearly referenced earlier storylines I hadn't seen. Not that it matters much. These movies rarely make sense, even if you've watched them all. By the final act, they almost always collapse into overblown, noisy displays of special effects, trying to overwhelm you with dazzle so you won't notice the weaker elements. For me, the hardest part is ignoring the glorification of weapons that saturates these films. Every fight seems obsessed with making the characters look cooler based on the size or flashiness of their weapon. With America's increasingly troubling gun culture, I can't dismiss this as just harmless fantasy anymore. Still, I admit that maybe I shouldn't even be watching movies like this if those issues are going to bother me. Putting that aside, the film is loaded with humor, doesn't get bogged down in seriousness, and features Cate Blanchett exuding dark allure in a dominatrix-like outfit until she tops it with an outlandish headdress that makes her resemble a demonic reindeer. Eventually, I grew weary, but to be fair, I'm not really the demographic these films are aimed at. Once more, greetings from the world of cinema. The central challenge with comic book adaptations is how to make one stand out from the countless others flooding theaters. Director Taika Waititi, together with writers Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost, delivers a clever solution, a screwball superhero adventure that fuses intergalactic warfare with an absurdly campy villain, resulting in one of the year's funniest movies. Viewers who prefer brooding and somber heroes may find this a jolt, but brace yourself for Jeff Goldblum's Grandmaster, an impeccably polite antagonist who seems plucked straight from the campy 1960s Batman TV show. Chris Hemsworth returns as Thor, this time leaning fully into his comedic instincts alongside his godlike physique. His complicated push-and-pull relationship with Loki Tom Hiddleston remains central, while his verbal sparring with Bruce Banner and the Hulk Mark Ruffalo adds more humor. Stylistically, it feels much closer to Guardians of the Galaxy than to previous Spock, Thor, or Avengers entries. As enjoyable as Goldblum is, the film truly belongs to Cate Blanchett, who dominates as Howe of the goddess of death, long-lost sister to Thor, and Loki and daughter of Odin, Anthony Hopkins. With a towering headpiece that makes any Kentucky Derby hat modest, she effortlessly shatters Thor's hammer, showing that elder sisters are unmatched at ruining their brother's treasured toys. Naturally, the looming destruction of Oscar drives the narrative. The supporting cast adds further entertainment. Idris Elba reprises Hamdall Tessa Thompson's steel scenes as the witty Valkyrie. Karl Urban's Scourge enjoys a memorable send-off. Ray Stevenson returns as Volstagg, and the stone-like Korg, voiced by Waititi himself, brings comic relief. Fans will appreciate the surprise cameos, including a hilarious stage play that sets the tone for the film's irreverence. Beyond the central rescue plot, overpowered villains, and bizarre alien false encounters, the script pays tribute to Marvel lore with nods to Planet Hulk and Fantastic Four, and the joy of seeing familiar faces reunited from Star Trek, Jurassic Park, and Westworld adds another layer of delight. Credit goes to Taika Waititi for steering the superhero genre onto a path both hilarious and refreshing, proving there's still room for reinvention in the overcrowded comic book movie landscape. He's best recognized for his comedic creations, such as Hunt for the Wilder People, one of my top picks from Hot 2016, What We Do in the Shadows, and his contribution to the clever yet short-lived Flight of the Conchords. Despite his quirky style, this remains distinctly a Marvel film with the unmistakable creative imprint of Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. At the same time, it delivers as a thrilling adventure movie that lays important groundwork for the upcoming Avengers Infinity War. And it also makes masterful use of Ellie Zeppelin's immigrant song like no film has before. The whole experience invites the audience to rock, laugh, and cheer through a story that's nearly as entertaining as cinema can get. Released in 2017 under the direction of Taika Waititi, Thor Ragnarok follows the events across Asgard and nearby realms as Thor's older sister, Cate Blanchett, seizes control of the kingdom, while Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth, is cast away to a junk-filled world overseen by the eccentric Grandmaster Jeff Goldblum. From there, Thor assembles an unlikely alliance in a desperate attempt to reclaim his homeland. The cast features Tom Hiddleston reprising Loki, Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner, and Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie. Anthony Hopkins and Benedict Cumberbatch also appear, embodying Odin and Doctor Strange. Having enjoyed the first two Thor films, I can say this installment tops them. It offers the most engaging storyline, the most intriguing new characters, and a sharp injection of humor that strikes a careful balance between comic relief and dramatic weight. Some parts even carry emotional resonance, like the Executioner's arc played by Karl Urban, and others carry deeper meanings such as Odin's revelation about Asgard's true nature. Much of the humor lands strongly, evoking bursts of laughter. While Blanchett dominates the screen with a performance that's both deadly, fierce, and strikingly alluring, making her one of the franchise's standout villains, this film also delivers the most satisfying depiction of the Hulk yet, giving him more lines than all his prior big screen appearances combined. Hulk, The Incredible Hulk, Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, Doctor. Strange's cameo is another highlight, seamlessly woven in and memorable. When Odin's long-forgotten firstborn, his daughter Hela, portrayed magnificently by Blanchett, who relishes every second, on screen finally emerges. Her devastating powers and insatiable hunger for domination force. Thor with Hemsworth leaning into sardonic humor that pays off. And Loki again caught in complicated family dynamics, though he does little to shape events directly to try and stop her. Unfortunately, they find themselves trapped on Sakaar, enslaved under the thumb of the Grandmaster, with Goldblum's charisma, flipping from playful to menacing in an instant. Here, Thor is forced into gladiatorial combat against the reigning champion, the Hulk Ruffalo, whose performance enriches the role with expanded personality, dialogue, and emotional shading. Though the story holds back from fully exploring his situation, while the comics delve further into this narrative, the film only brushes against its depth. Nevertheless, the supporting cast brings plenty to appreciate. The Thor trilogy has always been met with mixed criticism, much of it stemming from the inherent difficulty of blending its fantastical realms into the grounded, gritty framework established by Iron Man. In this chapter, Earth is virtually absent, and the only human presence is Doctor Strange, who himself exists beyond the ordinary. Characters like Jane Foster, Darcy, and Eric Selvig are written out with off-screen explanations, which is disappointing. However, freed from these earthly ties, the movie fully embraces its cosmic identity. Its tone draws closer to Guardians of the Galaxy, surpassing the second volume in quality, but falling just shy of the brilliance of the first. Honestly, there are a handful of small elements that feel like they were inserted just to redo old beats, and they would have been better if trimmed away. The blend of humor and drama doesn't reach the sharpness of that earlier balance, nor does it measure up to the strength of Robert Downey Jr.'s third solo outing. Still, despite the abundance of jokes, the film manages to retain its sense of weight and seriousness. The action sequences are brisk, constant, and enjoyable, though easily the most conventional Marvel aspect present. For some, this may come across as flat, uninspired, or overly polished, like a manufactured product. There's no denying, however, that there remains room for more distinctiveness and flair. Many are hoping that Black Panther will take that. Bobop, Thor, Ragnarok 2011-7. One half starring Chris Hemsworth, Thompson, Kate Blanchett, Idris Elba, Jeff Goldblum, Tessa Thompson, Carl Urban, Mark Ruffalo, Anthony Hopkins, Benedict Cumberbatch, Takeaway TD, Luke Hemsworth, Sam Neill, with the voice of Clancy Brown and a cameo from Stan Lee. This is a lively and quick-moving chapter of the Marvel saga centering on Thor as he confronts his long-forgotten yet dangerously destructive sister Hela, a fierce planet who is set on vengeance and tearing apart Asgard. Meanwhile, Thor finds himself forced into captivity as a gladiator, clashing in the arena with none other than his fellow Avenger Bruce Banner the Hulk. Director Taika Waititi, who also performs in CGI as an alien sidekick, cleverly flips the hero's world upside down, infusing the darkness of the narrative with welcome bursts of humor and lightness. The screenplay by Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost is laced with sharp wit, giving Hemsworth room to display his comedic timing with both confidence and charm, while also giving supporting and new characters a chance to shine. Hiddleston returns as the sly half-brother Loki, up to his usual trickery, though toned down in lethality this time, and the dynamic exchanges between Hemsworth and Ruffalo provide hilarious banter, reminiscent of classic Hope and Crosby duos. One aspect I've always appreciated about the Thor films is their refusal to drag. The runtime is kept tight and engaging. Ragnarok earns half its success from this alone, while the rest comes from its grand visuals, crowd-pleasing writing, and top pacing. The movie begins with a punch and never lets go. The brief but delightful appearance of Doctor Strange adds extra, flavor. Hela proves to be a formidable villain with a backstory that's skillfully developed. Thor's makeshift Revengers team brings fresh energy and expands Marvel's roster of heroes. The anticipation surrounding Hulk's re-entry pays off explosively when he finally arrives. The climax is staged with precision, using every element effectively under weighted east direction. The soundtrack is decent, the cinematography is outstanding, and the visual effects are so impressive that this installment can be called the most spectacular looking of the Thor trilogy. Editing is sharp and seamless, leaving little to criticize. The directing overall is strong, and while it could have been slightly tighter, the results are so satisfying that minor flaws hardly matter. In the end, Thor Ragnarok is an ideal crowd pleaser and a surefire moneymaker for Marvel. The studio continues to deliver superhero blockbusters that don't disappoint. If you're a fan of Marvel films, this one is absolutely essential viewing. It's a film that will appeal to both general audiences and hardcore fans alike, especially those who love big, bold spectacle. Without a doubt, this will go down as the highest-earning Thor movie. Don't miss it. This is pure entertainment that guarantees you'll leave satisfied. I give it 7/10. Though I could have awarded an 8, I believe such a mass-market spectacle, even when excellently done, doesn't quite deserve that higher rating. Having recently revisited the outstanding animated Justice League Crisis on Two Earths 2010, I felt it was the right moment to crack open another new MCU title I had skipped before, which led me to unwrap the third chapter of Thor, Perspective on the Film, Breaking Away, from the bleak palette of Thor: The Dark World 2013 reviewed previously. Director co-star Taika Waititi teams with Goosebumps 2015 also reviewed. Cinematographer Jabir Zerarb to unleash a Leah vibrant cosmic spectacle drenched in neon hues and bold primaries flooding the screen with energy. The visuals are powered by excellent CGI work that seamlessly ties Hulk's emotive expressions to Bruce Banner, while sweeping aerial shots from Waititi linger over Asgard's impending ruin. When Thor and Hulk collide in the contest of champions, the director injects a rush of style with rapid-fire whip pans tracking every blow in the thrilling action sequences before pulling back for sharp comedic close-ups culminating in brutal knockouts. Without the presence of other Avengers, Chris Hemsworth and Mark Ruffalo shine as a duo. Hemsworth mixes Thor's grave concern for Ogard with a dryly humorous seriousness, while Ruffalo, buried beneath layers of CGI, captures Banner's inner conflict, fear, distrust, and uncertainty about controlling the monster within. Cate Blanchett revels in Hela's wickedly gleeful dialogue, while Jeff Goldblum steals scenes as the eccentric lounge-like grandmaster. Drawing clear influence from Greg Pak and Carlo Pagolin's Planet Hulk, the screenplay by Christopher Last, Craig Kyle, and Eric Pearson balances fun spectacle with thoughtful subtext, particularly in Thor's evolving sense of heroism. His loyalty to Asgard is challenged by revelations of the kingdom's colonial brutality long hidden by Odin's whitewashed history. Hela's return with palace murals concealing her legacy of conquest forces Thor to embrace a new role, not preserving Asgard's wealth or empire, but protecting its people. Ultimately, he leads his citizens to abandon their homeland, choosing survival and refuge over conquest. To call Thor Ragnarok 2017 the strongest of the Thor trilogy is perhaps modest praise, but it stands true despite tonal shifts. The film, though uneven and slow to find its rhythm, taking nearly half its runtime to settle, gains momentum as comedy, blends with its sci-fi stylization, crafting a unique entry in the MCU. The approach is imperfect, sometimes clashing with established characters, but undeniably injects fun that elevates the whole. While it stumbles in fully delivering emotional resonance and its villainous feels somewhat underdeveloped, it remains engaging, especially in the latter half. By keeping the focus tighter on plot than one might expect, it entertains consistently with strong character, beats, humor, and spectacle. The first half drags, and it doesn't leave us deep an impact as it could, but it still succeeds in pleasing disenchanted Thor fans so long as they accept some changes. In the characters, DNA certainly it surpasses his earlier solo outings. The story follows Thor stripped of Mjolnir and stranded across the universe, racing against time to return home and halt Ragnarok, the apocalyptic destruction of Asgard brought forth by the unstoppable Hela. Before anything else, Thor must endure a brutal gladiatorial clash where he faces none other than his former comrade and fellow Avenger, the Hulk. Personally, I've never liked Thor. He has always struck me as one of Marvel's dullest heroes. Yet this introduction caught me off guard. The visual effects were stunning. The humor carried that familiar Marvel spark, and the camera work was sharp. Still, the characters' overall background doesn't appeal to me, and the storyline itself doesn't quite win me over, though. I found myself intrigued halfway through, especially by the comedic tone. It was far better than its predecessors. The inclusion of other Marvel figures adds to the experience. Hulk and Doctor Strange, even though Strange isn't a favorite of mine, make it strong contributions. On first viewing, I absolutely loved this film. Chris Hemsworth's comedic timing was a revelation, and the decision to lean into humor, much like Guardians of the Galaxy, was a clever move. The writing is excellent, balancing comedy with meaningful character growth, particularly in the way both Thor and Loki finally embrace who they are. Several fresh faces are also introduced, likely to appear again. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, the heavy-drinking former Asgardian warrior, and Taika himself lending motion, capture and voice to Korg, the rock-bodied rebel. Impressively, the movie juggles all these characters without making their presence feel unnecessary. The soundtrack is a highlight too, with a retro synth-driven score and smartly placed licensed songs. Visually, the film is breathtaking, as Oscar and Sakaar each feel distinct yet equally impressive. The battles are executed with clarity, energy, and purpose. So, why isn't it flawless? Like most comedies, its surprises and cameos lose impact. On repeat viewings and following Infinity War, its once upbeat ending carries a bittersweet weight. Still, Ragnarok shines as one of Marvel's boldest experiments, proving that superhero movies can successfully borrow from other genres while staying true to their core. Add another star if you're watching for the first time. I wasn't sure what to expect going in, having seen only one trailer that looked chaotic and random. Indeed, the film often feels scattered, but it's also wildly entertaining with plenty of familiar Marvel faces. Hulk appeared far more often than I expected, speaking more here than in all his solo outings combined. Loki, too, delivered his usual charm, and his dynamic with Thor remains endlessly engaging. There's so much happening that it almost feels like a Guardians film with Thor slotted in. The narrative centers on Thor's struggle against a force threatening the annihilation of Asgard. After overcoming this destructive being, Thor returns to find Odin replaced by Loki. Their search for Odin on Earth leads them to Doctor Strange and eventually the revelation of Hela, Thor's long-imprisoned sister, who claims the throne of Asgard. While Thor is cast away to the chaotic scrap planet of Sakaar, ruled by the eccentric Grandmaster, he must face the planet's champion, plot his escape, and somehow return home to challenge Hela and reclaim his people's future. I have always enjoyed the dynamic between Thor and Loki since their banter is consistently laced with comedy. One particular moment stands out where Thor is strapped to a chair, and in the audience I notice someone relaxing. Casually turns out, of course, it was Loki. Marufalo's portrayal of Bruce Banner also impressed me. He plays the character as somewhat unstable and scattered, with the Hulk clearly having dominated his identity for some time. I found it amusing when both Hulk and Banner teased Thor by accusing him of favoring the other more. Performances from Jeff Goldblum and Cate Blanchett were also quite strong and memorable. Overall, I would sum up the film as fun, very much in the same lively, colorful spirit as the Guardians of the Galaxy movies or the more recent Spider-Man. Since losing my fiancée, life has offered me little to anticipate, but Marvel's films continue to give me something to look forward to. They manage to remain highly entertaining and bring a fleeting smile to my face, which is something I deeply appreciate. I expect I will go see Justice League when it is released in a couple of weeks, though I doubt it will resonate with me as much. Marvel just has a formula that works better in my view. They aren't afraid to slip in outrageous moments like Hulk lounging in a hot tub and stepping out completely unclothed, his bare backside shown without hesitation. For me, this was simply a delightful, entertaining movie that helped distract me from sadness, even if only temporarily. And for that, I am sincerely thankful. But I can't help but wonder, when did Thor Saga shift into outright slapstick? Thor? Ragnarok is filled to the brim with slapstick gags. Not a single scene escapes it, which unfortunately strips away any sense of seriousness, tension, or realism it might have had. On top of that the film is drenched in CGI literally every scene and an overwhelming amount of it. I also question Doctor Strange's appearance here. Doesn't he already have his own storyline? I usually dislike crossovers that scatter characters into other franchises, much like what happens with the Avengers, Justice League, or Iron Man showing up in Spider-Man. So, repetitive. To be honest, I only lasted about 30 minutes before hitting the stop. How I even made it that far is beyond me. Rarely do I abandon a film altogether, but this one pushed me there. And while I can't comment on the entire movie, from what I have gathered, it maintains this slapstick tone throughout. The best way to watch it really is by reminding yourself constantly that none of it makes sense. That mantra is the key to enjoying it. Half the film unfolds on a junkyard planet that has zero relevance to the Marvel Universe, while the other half plays out in Asgard's royal and mythic settings. It feels absurd. Honestly, I preferred the bizarre junk planet sequences over Asgard itself. The plot barely matters. You've seen it in the trailers already. Hela arrives, re-res. Havoc. That's that. I had hoped the addition of a sister would create a new dynamic between Thor and Loki. But instead, the film resorts to the tired trope of an all-powerful yet hollow villain. What's left to appreciate are the characters and the overall atmosphere. The truth is, the movie entertains. Its action, relentless humor, absurd cameos, and larger-than-life aesthetic, all piled together into something that borders on parody. It feels like the studio heads wanted to reshape Thor into a Guardian-style comedy. And while it succeeds in being silly and funny, that doesn't automatically make it exceptional. Many movies are equally absurd and comedic, yet receive little recognition. In the end, I was torn, simultaneously entertained and let down. At the end of the day, it is still a Thor movie, and my expectations were never high. Most of the standout moments were already spoiled in the trailers, and when an entire planet is reduced to looking like something from an old Stargate SG-1 episode, complete with rag-clad villagers, I couldn't help but cringe. My takeaway, kids will love it, and it's a decent watch if you're drunk or high. But beyond that, it is mediocre. That said, pairing Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song with Thor battling a fire demon was unexpectedly thrilling, even for someone like me who never really counted themselves a hot Zeppelin fan. The film's opening immediately pulled me in, but soon enough, Ragnarok shifted into the usual Marvel-style sitcom formula, which left me disappointed. That's not to say there aren't plenty of enjoyable elements sprinkled throughout. Cate Blanchett hamming it up as the menacing villain, Jeff Goldblum leaning completely into his eccentric persona, the comical rock creature, the Viking meets heavy metal visual flair, and that pulsating 8s-inspired synth soundtrack. Still, despite all the attempts to re-energize Marvel's most monotonous Avenger, the movie's swiftness and lightness may be its strongest traits. This latest Thor entry, shaped by 6 different writers, directed by Taika Waititi, and bolstered with star power, offers humor, layers of CGI, spectacle, and a familiar taste. Overall, the core story, such as it is, centers on Thor, Chris Hemsworth, imprisoned on Sakaar without Millen, who must fight Hulk, Mark Ruffalo in a gladiatorial arena, and then join forces with Hulk, Valkyrie, Tessa Thompson, and Loki Tom Hiddleston to confront Hela Cape, Blanchett, and prevent Ragnar, the prophesied doom of Asgard. Along the way, fresh faces come and go. Scourge, Karl Urban, Grandmaster Jeff Goldblum, Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, Sir Clancy Brown, Heimdall, Idris Elba, and Odin Anthony Hopkins. For clarity, Ragnar isn't a character, but the end of a cigar civilization. Does the narrative hold together? Not really, but it's a comic book movie after all. If you're a fan of Thor, you'll have a blast so long as you can look past the CGI overload. The film is a beast, skillfully crafted, with striking set pieces, and without question, one of the funniest MCU installments. On rewatch, I'd even call it the funniest. Its soundtrack ranks among my favorites in the franchise, and Hela stands out as a phenomenal villain, ferocious, magnetic, and deserving of more screen time. While one joke feels misplaced and pulls you out of the moment, the majority of the humor lands effectively. Overall, it's a vibrant and entertaining ride. As Odin Anthony Hopkins wisely remarks, Asgard is not a place, it's a people. The film explores that idea, showing that the survival of Asgard isn't about geography, but about its citizens. A subtle nod to the struggles of modern immigrants who carry their home within them as they move. Watching them flee aboard a starship in Ark of Sorts blends biblical symbolism with spacefaring adventure. What redeems these superhero epics from both Marvel and DC is how they merge cultures and comment on humanity's enduring quest to rise above its flaws, striving to be greater while staying grounded in imperfection. The sharp, self-aware humor and lightheartedness add humanity, signaling the maturation of the superhero genre. Here, Thor is more than a hammer-swinging, muscle-bound figure. He is a son coping with Odin's death, brother navigating Loki's mischief, and a man facing the destructive wrath of his sister Hela. Their family drama, though far more extreme than ours, mirrors the same messy ties that define real relationships. Despite their futuristic technology, these characters still clash with blades and dun, reminding us that conflict begins in the mind. From ancient tragedies like Oedipus Rex to modern ties like Willy Lawman, we've always been drawn to stories of human greatness and downfall. Hubris across eras continues to find its stage. While this movie indulges in too many explosions for my liking, the cultural and emotional storms it portrays are both entertaining and metaphorical. Blending sharp wit with thrilling action, Ragnarok easily surpasses its predecessors, aligning more with the comedic energy of Guardians of the Galaxy than the weaker earlier entries. The newcomers shine brightly, Goblin as a slick, over-the-top ruler, Thompson as a fearless, hard-drinking warrior who merits her own spin-off, and Waititi himself stealing scenes as the hilarious, rock-bodied Korg. The narrative is compelling, and the director maintains a lively, energetic rhythm that never lets things drag. The Thor series has truly elevated itself with this installment. What a surprise, bursting with bold choices. Thor Ragnarok is a delight from start to finish. Much of the credit belongs to director Taika Waititi, whose vision drives so many of the film's best moments, and one can only hope he helms the next sequel as well. Several aspects make this movie stand out, even though I didn't watch it. In 3D, the visuals, while audiences may have grown accustomed to polished CGI, here the spectacle is among the most dazzling Marvel has produced. The portrayal of distant planets, intense battles, and vivid characters ranks this film among the finest in terms of visual effects. The casting-inspired choices abound. Starting with Cate Blanchett as Hela, the central villain bent on seizing Asgard. She faces plenty of competition given the numerous enemies eager to topple Thor in his realm. Tom Hiddleston once again nails Loki with ease. Tessa Thompson brings confidence and grit as Valkyrie, though her allegiances waver. Jeff Goldblum as the eccentric Grandmaster feels tailor-made for weight to these quirky comedic style. And beyond them, a wide range of supporting roles and cameos add extra layers of Fun, the humor already noted, but worth emphasizing. Comedy is central to this film's appeal, much in the vein of Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a daring move to inject so much silliness into a mythic story of gods and warriors clashing, yet works. The story, the plot of Ragnarok is playful, twisting, and surprisingly inventive. Non-linear turns keep the audience on its toes, mixing delightfully light banter and whimsical detours with more serious, high-stakes confrontations between Thor and those who threaten his people and his world. One pitch-perfect flourish comes in the form of a Led Zeppelin track, which feels uncannily as though it were written for a climactic battle, pausing the action just long enough to let Odin himself sew up the music. Released in 2017, Thor Ragnarok is the third Thor film, the 17th entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and directed by Taika Waititi. I've watched it several times now, and on rewatch I can confirm it stands as my favorite Thor movie within the MCU. Strengths of Thor. Ragnarok. This is the most enjoyment I've had with any Thor film in Taika Waititi. Deserves the praise for shaping that experience. He injects his trademark humor while still reining it in enough to keep the tone balanced. Chris Hemsworth radiates joy in his performance, yet he retains the weight and gravitas of Thor's character from earlier films. Tom Hiddleston continues to impress as Loki with an even sharper, funnier dynamic, alongside Thor than in the Dark World 2013. The introduction of new characters is also a highlight. Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie, Karl Urban's Scourge, and Wade's own hilarious turn as Korg. The villains are top tier, with Blanchett embodying the menacing Gila and Goldblum reveling in the oddball flair of the Grandmaster. Emotional depth surfaces as, well, most memorably with Odin's farewell to his sons before dying, followed by the catastrophic fall of Asgard at the hands of a colossal fire demon. The action sequences are spectacular. Thor's gladiatorial duel with the Hulk electrifies, while the climactic showdown in Asgard brims with epic energy. Pacing remains strong throughout, keeping the audience engaged and invested in every development. Finally, the mid-credit tease featuring Thanos confronting the heroes aboard his ship delivers a thrilling cliffhanger that seamlessly bridges into Avengers Infinity War 2018. In essence, Thor Ragnarok is a vibrant, humorous, and high-energy blockbuster. It leans heavily into comedy compared to its predecessors, though at times this makes characters act in ways quite unlike their past selves. Still, it's a colorful, fast-paced spectacle that cements itself as a standout Marvel entry. It may not surpass the strength of the original entry, yet it certainly outshines Thor: The Dark World, and no, imperfect, it delivers a lively and entertaining spectacle. Under the vision of New Zealand filmmaker Taika Waititi, this third chapter in Marvel's saga of the Thunder God abandons the Shakespearean gravitas of its forerunners, instead tweaking the conventional formula while injecting personality. From the opening moments, Thor Chris Hemsworth seems unusually talkative as he confronts the fire giant. Sir, a foe threatening Ogard with Ragnarok, the legendary apocalypse of Norse mythology, only to be swiftly dispatched by the fall, threatening Asgard with Ragnarok. The legendary apocalypse of Norse mythology, only to be swiftly dispatched by the fallen nun. Asgard with Ragnarok, the legendary apocalypse of Norse mythology, only to be swiftly dispatched by the Shainesh hero's might. This prologue establishes the film's balance of humor and spectacle, promising a dazzling interstellar adventure. Yet the true peril originates from within Thor's lineage. Odin Anthony Hopkins, now frail and nearing death, warns his sons of his firstborn Hela, Cate Blanchett, the ruthless goddess of death, whom he once imprisoned, but whose return will bring carnage to Ogard, including the merciless slaughter of the Warriors Three. Overpowered by Hela, Thor and Loki Tom Hiddleston are cast onto Sagaar, a chaotic waste planet, cleverly echoing humanity's own consumerist wastefulness, where the eccentric Grandmaster, a deliciously sardonic Jeff Goldblum, presides, entertaining himself with gladiatorial duels. Here, Thor is forced into combat with his fellow Avenger, the Hulk Mark Ruffalo. conveniently accounting for both heroes' absence from Captain America Civil War 2016. Eventually, Thor allies with Loki, Hulk, and the hard-drinking warrior, Valkyrie, Tessa Thompson, forming an unlikely team to confront Hela's dominance and her resurrected legions. If Ragnarok is destined, their only option is to salvage a handful of survivors, even if this means sacrificing an entire world for a fragile remnant of life. The conclusion, therefore, is bittersweet. Triumph mixed with irrevocable loss, humor tempered by gravity. Hemsworth shines with new comic flair enhanced by his stylish haircut and his physical charisma. While Hiddleston and Idris Elba Haydal seem primed for image updates of their own, Blanchett relishes her role, exuding menace with live combat moves and striking attire. Though her performance might have benefited from more nuanced shading, Thompson's Valkyrie adds to Marvel's growing lineup of female heroes, proving herself formidable in battle and charming in personality. Waititi's reinvention revitalizes the Thor series within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, offering vibrant colors, clever musical cues, eye-popping visuals, and energetic action. Beneath the blockbuster sheen lies an offbeat touch of individuality, signaling that Thor Ragnarok refuses to merely coast on its brand. Widely regarded as the strongest entry of the trilogy, it stands out for its humor, energy, and accessibility, drawing larger audiences and higher box office returns than its predecessors. Fresh characters like Valkyrie and Hela add dynamism, while Hulk's interplay with Thor becomes a comedic and dramatic highlight. The action sequences dazzle. The climactic bridge battle benefits from a fitting soundtrack. And despite being the longest installment, the pacing feels brisk and rewarding. The ensemble cast clearly revels in the BS material, especially Hemsworth building anticipation for Thor, Love and Thunder. Released in 2017, Thor Ragnarok features Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Tessa Thompson, Cate Blanchett, Jeff Goldblum, and Idris Elba in a science fiction superhero spectacle. Directed by Taika Waititi, who also appeared alongside Ryan Reynolds in Free Guy. This installment tells the story of Thor, Chris Hemsworth embarking on a journey across time to prevent Hela Cate Blanchett, donning jet black hair, from conquering Asgard. The movie excels with striking cinematography, a fitting score, and consistently strong performances. Several amusing cameos are sprinkled throughout, including Sam Neill as fake Odin, Luke Hemsworth as fake Thor, Matt Damon as fake Loki, and Zachary Levi making a blink, and you'll miss it. Appearances Fandral. In this film, Thor feels like a blend of Peter Pan, King Arthur, and the Norse god himself. Ragnarok combines elements of both the Planet Hulk storyline and the mythical apocalypse, though the balance is tilted roughly 15% Planet Hulk and a compressed version of Ragnarok. It veers away from both comic lore and myth, turning into a simplified, almost child-friendly variation of the saga. The film begins with Thor as a powerhouse, keeps him in that mode throughout, and ends with him still every bit the hero, finally giving the character his due just before the events of Infinity War. Visually, it is a major step forward from Thor: The Dark World, highlighting how much the character has evolved since the first film. Thor shines, Loki sparkles as well, while Hulk feels somewhat underutilized good, but not quite elevated. Jeff Goblins. Grandmaster is portrayed as a laid-back yet ruthless tyrant, while Anthony Hopkins as Odin is once again largely squandered, the most wasted MCU role to date. Valkyrie, with her quirky look, reminiscent of childhood Happy Meal Furby toys, carries her role through layers of guilt and bitterness. Hela, however, stands tall as the MCU's best villain prior to Thanos, easily overshadowing earlier antagonists, like Ultron, who was serviceable at best. Altogether, the film blends space opera, gladiatorial combat, apocalyptic stakes, Viking myth, drama, medieval fantasy, and comedy, creating a wildly entertaining ride. Personally, I still rank Thor 2011 as the best due to its role in bringing the character to live action, but Ragnarok earns a strong second place, while The Dark World lags in third. Produced by the Disney Marley team, it's another crowd pleaser, especially since Thor loses his iconic hammer early on and must face most of the story without it. The script draws heavily from Stan Lee's original franchise, and visually the film dazzles with Australian landscape, shining in the Atlanta, Georgia locations woven in seamlessly. Humor and spectacle flow throughout, with Chris Hemsworth once again anchoring the role. Even post-haircut with vigor, Tom Hiddleston remains an ideal Loki. Kate Blanchett delivers delicious menace as Hela. Tessa Thompson gives a layered performance as the initially drunken Valkyrie, and Jeff Goldblum brings eccentric hilarity as the Grandmaster. The casting overall is spot-on, another triumph for Marvel's team, although Stan Lee's cameo is absent here. His influence is still felt in the spirit and creativity that define the film. As always, stick around after the credits for bonus surprises. In the long run, these Marvel films will undoubtedly be remembered as cultural landmarks for this generation. Most importantly, this is the kind of movie where you can simply sit back, turn off your brain, and enjoy a spectacular mix of humor, action, and chemistry between cast and script. Thor Ragnarok is an action comedy adventure that balances imprisonment, cosmic battles, and looming destruction with laughs and thrills. Thanks to Taika Waititi's brilliant direction and standout performances from Hemsworth as Thor, Blanchard as Hela, Ruffalo as Banner, Hiddleston as Loki, Thompson as Valkyrie, and Goblin as the Grandmaster. The result is a vibrant, highly entertaining experience I would recommend to anyone looking for both laughter and excitement, serving as the continuation of Thor 2011 and Thor The Dark World 2013, both enjoyable entries in their own right. Thor Ragnarok emerges as one of the most deliberately ridiculous superhero films to hit the big screen in recent years. Thankfully, the absurdity here is by design. Synopsis: Thor finds himself stranded on the alien world of Ed Sakar, forced to break free before Hela brings destruction upon Asgard in the form of Ragnar. The movie entertains thoroughly while it lasts, but one lingering question remains. Did the comedy really need to dominate to the point of saturation? Admittedly, the humor lands often, keeping the story alive with constant energy, but eventually the laughs begin to feel more obligatory than natural. It is amusing to watch Thor, the so-called god of thunder, reduced to the punchline of countless jokes, as well as to witness Hulk's endless rage, counterbalanced by Bruce Banner's continual state of bewilderment. Yet that novelty has its limits. The screenplay by Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost embraces humor with abandon. And while successful in that department, it comes at the cost of a forgettable antagonist and occasional pacing stumbles. The remarkable Taika helms this superhero spectacle with a bold mix of zenith and ambition. On the technical side, the film excels cinematography, editing, production design, costumes, and visual effects all impress. Among the cast, Chris Hemsworth delivers a committed and hilarious performance as Thor. Mark Ruffalo shines as the conflicted Banner Hulk, while Tom Hiddleston's Loki offers only a moderate impact this time around. Kate Blanchett's Hela, unfortunately, is rendered more seductive than nuanced, functioning as a one-dimensional villain. By contrast, Jeff Goldblum's flamboyant Grandmaster nearly steals every scene. If you were to ask the average moviegoer a decade ago whether the third film of a relatively obscure Marvel character like Thor would outshine the first big screen union of DC's legendary icons Batman and Superman, most would have doubted it. Many wouldn't even recognize the Norse god compared to Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent. Yet in late 2017, Thor Ragnarok premiered mere weeks before Justice League and single-handedly derailed DC's hopes of box office supremacy. While Marvel vs. DC debates rage on, I've always considered myself neutral. Batman has long been my personal favorite, so my expectations for Justice League were high. I even watched it prior to Ragnarok and found it decent. But after experiencing Thor Ragnarok, it became clear why DC's ensemble was faltering. Rarely do sequels surpass their originals, exceptions like Aliens, Terminator 2, and The Empire Strikes Back come to mind, but third installments almost never outperform both predecessors. This, however, is one of those rare cases. Simply put, Thor Ragnarok is phenomenal. The film feels as though it benefited from a significantly larger budget and a license to fully indulge in its characters. Many consider it the funniest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a film that refuses to take itself too seriously and is stronger because of it. The camaraderie among the cast radiates through the screen, suggesting genuine fun during production. Familiar faces from earlier Thor adventures return, including Anthony Hopkins, Thor's loyal companions, and most importantly, Tom Hiddleston reprising Loki. Given Marvel's history of underwhelming villains, Loki remains the standout adversary in the MCU, and Ragnarok smartly expands his presence. That said, Blanchett's Hala still provides flair with some sharp dialogue, making this perhaps the rare Marvel movie boasting two formidable villains at once. Still, the spotlight belongs to Chris Hemsworth. His effortless charisma, comedic timing, and physical presence carry the film from start to finish. Without his performance, Ragnarok simply wouldn't hold the same spark. He has truly grown into the role, and his chemistry flows effortlessly with both returning and newly introduced characters. Although only a handful of fresh faces are added this time around, they blend so naturally into the story that it feels as though they've always been part of the universe. And without diving back into the never-ending Thor versus Justice League argument, the simple fact that these new additions feel so relatable, unlike the Justice League's heroes, who often come across as force-fitted into the lineup to bulk up its hero quota, proves just how skillfully Thor has been written. I genuinely wanted to enjoy Justice League more, but in all honesty, it just didn't work for me. Thor, on the other hand, was bursting with excitement, action-packed, irresistibly light in tone, and visually dazzling, with a palette that made it a brighter and more colorful spectacle. If I had to point out one flaw, it would be that some of the CGI, especially in the newly constructed world, still carried a slightly artificial look. Yet the sheer enjoyment offered by this grand popcorn flick easily made up for that shortcoming. I'm not saying Marvel's past productions have been disappointing, but I sincerely hope they create more films like this one. Oh, and let's not forget the electrifying soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. The storyline revolves around the prophecy of Ragnarok, which in Norse legend represents the apocalyptic end of days. It is the climactic confrontation between the gods and the forces of chaos, where most deities meet their doom and at both heaven and earth are consumed by catastrophic fire and destruction, wiping out humanity as well. Only a select few gods and a pair of humans are destined to survive, tasked with repopulating and rebuilding the world in a new age, where evil, having been defeated, would cease to exist. In this film, however, the prophecy is narrowed down to signify the destruction of Thor's homeland and people, rather than the obliteration of the entire universe. I must admit, though, I wasn't deeply impressed overall. Yes, the visuals are breathtaking and the production quality is undeniably top tier, but the style leaned heavily into a psychedelic and surreal aesthetic, far more experimental than the traditional epic tone of the earlier Thor entries. That said, the injection of comedy was a pleasant surprise, as the dialogues were cleverly written and the humorous interludes carried a touch of creativity. Director Taika Waititi has proven himself to be highly capable, and Marvel's enormous resources allowed him to go Allen, showcasing not only his own flair, but also the combined imagination and skill of his cast and crew. Visually, the movie bursts with light, color, and striking CGI, practically begging to be experienced on a giant screen in a state-of-the-art theater. That's really the only way to take in something so massive. Still, this is also where I struggled. Psychedelic style, along with the bold choices in color and sound, simply wasn't to my taste, but that comes down to personal preference. On a more positive note, the action deserves full praise. From the choreographers to the stunt performers, every sequence was carefully executed, avoiding unnecessary excess while still delivering impact. The fight scenes mocked seamlessly with sound effects and an energetic score, enhanced by the clever use of Led Zeppelin's legendary Immigrant Song, a track instantly recognizable even to those not steeped in rock culture. As for the cast, they shine in different ways. Chris Hemsworth reveals a playful, easygoing side of Thor that he hadn't been able to embrace before, finding room for situational comedy delivered with charm. Tom Hiddleston doesn't have as much to do this time, yet he maintains the same reliable quality from past appearances. Cate Blanchett faces material very different from her usual dramatic range, but she handles the villainous role effectively, even though this film will not be counted among her greatest achievements. Anthony Hopkins bids farewell to both Odin and this franchise with another performance that proves his talent yet again. Ma Ruffalo and Benedict Cumberbatch also appear stepping in to move the storyline forward by portraying Marvel characters who usually don't cross paths with Thor. Both do a commendable job, with Ruffalo in particular standing out. Tessa Thompson was a lucky addition to the cast, introducing another strong female presence through a demanding role. And then there's Jeff Goldblum, who once again just plays himself effortlessly, bringing his familiar quirky energy without much strain. While the earlier Thor installments felt somewhat underwhelming and overly flat, though not without their points of interest, this film takes an entirely different approach. Under the creative vision of director Taiti, it fully embraces both comedy and drama. The movie bursts with color and fun, drawing comparisons more to Guardians of the Galaxy than to the darker tones of past Thor outings, and it succeeds remarkably in that shift. The visual effects and cinematography are dazzling, with striking imagery and spectacular action set pieces. The writing sparkles with wit, and the villain is compelling, as is the deepened look in the dynamic between Thor, Loki, and of course the Hulk. At times, the story even feels reminiscent of a road trip adventure. Personally, I prefer superhero films that lean more toward darkness than pure silliness. And for me, this entry pushed too far into the lighthearted side. The saving grace from my point of view was the hulking presence of Buff Shrek himself. Still, the film shines in creativity, vibrancy, and visual appeal, all of which are undeniable strengths. Though unlikely, I sometimes imagine a Joker-like version of Thor, dark, brooding, scarred, that could bring an entirely different tone to the saga. This third entry in the successful Marvel Studios series and the 17th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe overall follows Thor as he joins forces with Hulk to break free from a trashy planet and return to Asgard in time to prevent Ragnarok, directed by Taiki, already known for indie comedy gems like What We Do in the God, Shadows and Hunt for the Wilder People, and scripted by Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost. The film stars Chris Hemsworth once more embodying his most famous role alongside Tom Hiddleston, Cate Blanchett, Mark Ruffalo, Tessa Thompson, Jeff Goldblum, Karl Urban, Idris Elba, and Anthony Hopkins. It has been met with some of the strongest reviews for a Marvel film to date and has also triumphed at the box office. I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. This time, Thor has spent over 2 years searching for the Infinity Stones, during which he's captured by Sur, a fiery demon. Sur reveals that Odin Hopkins is absent from Asgard, and that the realm faces destruction through the prophecy of Ragnarok. After defeating Sur, Thor heads home only to discover Loki Hiddleston masquerading as Odin. He compels Loki to accompany him to Earth, where they locate their father in Norway. Odin reveals his life is ending, and with his death, their sister Hela Blanchett will be freed to reclaim Asgard. As they attempt to stop, Thor and Loki end up stranded on Sakaar, a junk planet where Thor finds Hulk, who followed trapped in his green form for over 2 years. Thor then tries to enlist Hulk's help in saving their homeland. This film tilts far more toward comedy than its predecessors, which I find to be a fitting choice for Thor's character, and the humor is executed effectively. Wade is proven. comedic brilliance shines through, and the playful 1980s Flash Gordon vibe adds an extra layer of charm. Performances are strong across the board. However, the film feels slightly drawn out and drags in certain moments. Even if the overall experience remains thoroughly enjoyable, this movie doesn't quite measure up as a high-octane action piece when set against other modern superhero releases, largely because of how much comedy fills the runtime. Still, it's undeniably entertaining and definitely worth watching. After spending years contributing reviews on this site, I'm thrilled to share that this marks my 1000th write-up. I wanted to celebrate the occasion with something memorable, so I chose to review the most widely praised superhero film of the gap. Among the Thor series, this entry is unquestionably the best, released during what has been one of the strongest years for comic book movies. Overall, nearly every title has been a hit. But back to the film itself, its story centers on Thor and Loki's return to Asgard, where they face Thor's long-lost sister, Hela. That's essentially the core narrative, but it hardly limits the enjoyment of this modern Marvel highlight. Unlike other MCU films that either spotlighted a single hero or the entire Avengers lineup, this one finds a balance by focusing on two of them, Thor and the Hulk. In fact, it might easily be considered the finest Hulk outing to date. What really elevates the experience, however, is the film's visual splendor. Nearly every frame bursts with vivid colors and lush designs. The movie embraces wild creativity, ensuring no dull moment ever creeps in, while also sprinkling in plenty of clever jokes. One hilarious nod referenced the time Thor was turned into a frog in the comics, a moment that genuinely made me laugh out loud. My one real disappointment was the absence of Natalie Portman's character, since I enjoyed that pairing with Thor. As for Jeff Goldblum, I've always been a bit neutral on him, but his quirky performance here was delightful, as was the rest of the cast. I do wish I'd read more of Thor's comic runs, because I didn't recognize many of the new faces, though I'm sure most were drawn from Marvel lore. This is part of why cinema excites me so much, and why I've kept at writing reviews, hitting this 1000th milestone today. The central conflict sees Thor battling his newly revealed sister Hela to save Asgard, but first he must survive a gladiator world where he's pitted against an old ally, none other than the Hulk, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.